The night everything changed was supposed to be ordinary, quiet, forgettable. One of those nights that slips away into memory without leaving a mark. No storms, no warnings, no sense that something irreversible was about to unfold. The streetlights hummed softly outside. The air was still, and inside the house, life continued exactly as it had the day before. That's what makes this story so unsettling. There was no dramatic build-up, no obvious danger, just a moment where time quietly split into before and after. When people talk about tragedies, they often imagine chaos, screams, violence, a clear villain. But sometimes the most terrifying cases are the ones that arrive silently, the ones that don't announce themselves, the ones where, even now, years later, no one can agree on what really happened. By the end of this story, you will probably have more questions than answers. Investigators did. The family still does. And the deeper you go, the more uncomfortable it becomes, because this isn't just about a crime. It's about trust, about decisions that seemed harmless at the time, and about a person who disappeared in plain sight. Her name was Evelyn Harper. To the outside world, Evelyn had the kind of life people quietly admired. Not flashy, not dramatic, just steady, predictable, safe. She grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone, the kind of place where doors were left unlocked and neighbors noticed if your porch light stayed on too long. Her parents raised her with structure and warmth in equal measure. There were rules, but there was also laughter, expectations, but also freedom to dream. Evelyn was an only child, and her parents poured everything into her. They attended every school event, every recital, every parent-teacher meeting. From a young age, it was obvious she was observant. She noticed things other people didn't. Changes in tone, small inconsistencies in stories. She remembered details that most people forgot within minutes. Teachers described her as thoughtful, not loud, not disruptive, but intensely focused. The kind of student who listened more than she spoke. She loved books, not the kind assigned in class, but the ones that made her think. Psychology, true stories, personal journals from people long gone. She liked understanding how people worked, what motivated them, what they hid from the world. Her mother once joked that Evelyn could read a person faster than a book, and in many ways, that was true. As she grew older, Evelyn developed a quiet independence. She didn't rebel, she didn't sneak out or break rules. Instead, she planned, carefully, methodically. She thought through decisions long before making them. Friends would later say that if Evelyn agreed to something, it was because she had already imagined every possible outcome. After high school, she left her hometown for college. It was the first time she had ever lived away from home, and while she missed her parents, she thrived in the new environment. She studied environmental science with a focus on policy, drawn to the idea that laws could shape the future of the planet. She wanted to make a difference, but not loudly, not publicly. She wanted impact without attention. That's when she met Daniel. They met in a way that felt modern and unremarkable. An app, a conversation that started slow and cautious. Evelyn never rushed into things, and Daniel seemed to understand that. He was patient, polite, thoughtful in his messages. They talked for weeks before meeting in person, discussing everything from books to childhood memories to long-term goals. When they finally met, the connection felt easy, comfortable, familiar. Daniel was charming in a restrained way, not overly confident, not aggressive. He listened. He asked questions. He remembered details Evelyn mentioned in passing. To her friends, he seemed like a good match, stable, intelligent, driven. To her parents, he appeared respectful and serious about Evelyn. There were no red flags, no gut feelings screaming danger. Their relationship progressed steadily. No whirlwind romance, no sudden moves, just two people slowly building a shared life. Evelyn moved into Daniel's apartment after nearly a year of dating. It was her decision, one she had clearly thought through. She kept her own savings account, her own car, her own sense of independence. If anything went wrong, she had an exit plan, or so she believed. For a while, everything seemed fine. But subtle changes began to surface. Things that, on their own, meant nothing, but together formed a pattern no one noticed until it was too late. Evelyn called her parents slightly less often. Not alarmingly so, just enough to be different. When she did call, she sounded distracted, like her mind was elsewhere. She brushed it off as stress. Work, school, life getting busy. Which made sense. She was juggling a lot. Her friends noticed she stopped coming to spontaneous gatherings. She always had a reason. Too tired, too much work. Another time. None of it seemed concerning. People grow apart. Priorities change. But then there were the comments, offhand remarks that didn't quite sit right. She joked once about how Daniel hated surprises, how he liked knowing exactly where she was at all times. She said it with a laugh, but there was something underneath it, something uneasy. When a friend asked if that bothered her, Evelyn shrugged it off. She said it was just how he was. Organized, protective. She said relationships were about compromise. No one pushed further. In the months leading up to her disappearance, Evelyn made a series of small, uncharacteristic decisions. She delayed applying to a graduate program she had talked about for years. She turned down a short-term internship opportunity that would have taken her out of town. She stopped updating her journal, something she had done religiously since she was a teenager. The last entry was brief, almost unfinished. If anyone had read it at the time, they might not have thought much of it, but in hindsight, it reads like someone trying to convince themselves of something they no longer believed. The last time Evelyn was seen by anyone outside of Daniel was on a Friday evening. She left work at her usual time. Security footage showed her walking through the parking lot, unlocking her car, and driving away. She sent a short text to her mother shortly after. Just a heart emoji. Nothing unusual. That night, neighbors in the apartment building heard nothing out of the ordinary. No arguments, no raised voices, no sounds of distress. Daniel later told police they had dinner, watched a movie, and went to bed like any other night. The next morning, Evelyn didn't show up for work. At first, her supervisor assumed she was sick or running late. By midday, concern set in. Evelyn was never late, never missed work without notice. Calls went unanswered, texts unread. By evening, her parents knew something was wrong. When police arrived at the apartment, Daniel answered the door alone. Calm, cooperative. He said Evelyn had left early that morning for a walk. She needed space, he explained. They had a small disagreement. Nothing serious. She just wanted time to think. There were no signs of a struggle inside the apartment. No broken items, no blood. Her phone, wallet, and keys were missing. Her car was still in the parking lot. That detail changed everything, because Evelyn never went anywhere without her car. As investigators began digging into the timeline, inconsistencies emerged. Daniel's story shifted slightly with each retelling. Small changes, nothing dramatic, but enough to raise eyebrows. He couldn't recall exact times, couldn't explain why Evelyn would leave without her car, couldn't provide a single witness who had seen her that morning. Search efforts began almost immediately. Volunteers combed nearby trails, parks, and wooded areas. Flyers went up across the city. Her parents spoke to the media, pleading for information. Friends shared photos, memories, desperate messages asking anyone to come forward. Days turned into weeks. Then something unexpected happened. A hasty decision made in the early hours of the investigation would change the course of this case forever. And once it was made, there was no undoing it. That decision, and what followed, is where this story takes a darker turn. And nothing after this point makes sense anymore. The first mistake happened quietly, disguised as routine procedure. Because there were no obvious signs of violence in the apartment, investigators initially treated Evelyn's disappearance as voluntary. An adult woman. No forced entry, no struggle, no immediate evidence of a crime. That assumption shaped everything that followed. Hours were lost, then days, and in cases like this, time is not just important, it's everything. Daniel was not detained. His phone was not immediately seized. The apartment was not locked down as a potential crime scene. He was allowed to leave, to go to work, to move freely through the city. By the time authorities realized something was deeply wrong, the window where the truth could have been preserved was already closing. Evelyn's parents sensed it immediately. Something about the explanation didn't sit right. Their daughter was cautious to the point of overthinking. She planned her days. She communicated. She never disappeared without explanation. And she especially would never leave without her car, without telling anyone where she was going, without her phone being traceable. They pushed, they called, they demanded answers. As pressure mounted, Daniel's behavior began to change. At first, he appeared cooperative. He answered questions. He expressed concern. He even joined a few early search efforts. But those close to him noticed something unsettling. His emotions felt rehearsed. The words were right, but the timing was off. When people spoke about Evelyn with desperation, he spoke about her with distance. Then came the contradictions. In one interview, Daniel said Evelyn left the apartment before sunrise. In another, he said it was already light outside. He couldn't remember what she was wearing. He said they argued, then later said it was barely a disagreement at all. When asked what the argument was about, his answers shifted. Stress. Future plans. Nothing specific. Investigators finally requested access to his phone records. What they found didn't point clearly to guilt, but it didn't point to innocence either. There were deleted messages. Entire conversations wiped clean. Not just with Evelyn, but with others as well. When asked about it, Daniel claimed he regularly deleted old texts to keep his phone organized. It was a habit, he said, something he'd always done. But the timing was suspicious. Surveillance footage from nearby streets showed Evelyn's car had not moved for over 24 hours after she was supposedly last seen leaving. Yet Daniel claimed she had planned to go for a long walk, possibly meet someone, maybe clear her head. There was no evidence she met anyone, no bank activity, no phone pings, no sightings. Then something else surfaced. A co-worker came forward and shared a conversation she'd had with Evelyn just days before she vanished. Evelyn had mentioned feeling overwhelmed, not by work, not by school, but by expectations. She said she felt like she was constantly being watched, constantly having to explain herself. She didn't say by whom. She didn't have to. That comment reframed everything. Investigators began re-examining the relationship dynamic. Friends were interviewed again, this time with different questions. Slowly, a picture emerged that had been invisible before. Not overt abuse, not screaming fights or physical violence, but control, subtle, persistent, wrapped in concern. Daniel had strong opinions about who Evelyn spent time with, about how late she stayed out, about what information she shared online. He framed it as protection, as care, as love. And Evelyn, ever thoughtful, ever willing to compromise, adjusted. Little by little, her world got smaller. Still, none of this was proof of a crime. Weeks passed. Public attention grew. Online communities dissected every detail. Some believed Evelyn had left willingly. Others were convinced something terrible had happened behind closed doors. Rumors spread, theories multiplied, and through it all, Daniel stayed silent. Until he didn't. Nearly 2 months after Evelyn vanished, Daniel contacted investigators with new information. He said he remembered something he hadn't mentioned before. A detail he claimed had slipped his mind due to stress. He said Evelyn had talked about going to a nearby coastal trail that morning, a place she loved, a place she found calming. Search teams returned to the area. This time, they found something. Not a body, not answers, just an item. Evelyn's scarf. It was lying off the trail, partially buried under leaves, weathered, dirty, but unmistakably hers. Her parents recognized it immediately. The discovery sent shockwaves through the case. How had it been missed during earlier searches? Why was it there now? Had it always been there, overlooked? Or had it been placed later? Investigators couldn't say. Forensic testing revealed nothing conclusive. No DNA that shouldn't have been there. No clear indication of what happened to her. Just another question added to an already overwhelming list. Daniel was questioned again. This time, his demeanor was different. He was defensive, frustrated. He expressed anger at the investigation, saying he felt targeted, that people were assuming the worst about him, that Evelyn would have wanted him to move on, not be trapped in endless suspicion. That statement didn't sit well with anyone. As months turned into a year, the case stalled, without a body, without physical evidence, without a confession. Prosecutors had nothing solid to work with. The file was never closed, but it grew cold. Evelyn's parents refused to let her name fade. They organized searches. They held vigils. They pushed for media coverage. They hired independent experts to review the case. Again and again, they came back to the same conclusion. Too much didn't add up. Why delete messages? Why delay mentioning the trail? Why no sightings? Why did every version of the story place Daniel in a position where there were no witnesses? Psychologists who reviewed the case later would describe it as a textbook example of ambiguity trauma, the kind of loss that never resolves. No funeral, no certainty, just endless waiting. Daniel eventually moved away. He started a new job, a new life. To outsiders, he was a man who had lost his fiancée under tragic circumstances. To those who knew the details, he was a question mark that would never fully disappear. Years later, the case remains unsolved. No arrests, no remains, no definitive answers. Just a woman who vanished from a life she carefully built. A trail of inconsistencies, and a silence that refuses to break. The most unsettling part is this. If Evelyn hadn't been so cautious, if she hadn't believed in compromise, if she hadn't trusted the wrong kind of calm, would she still be here? And the question that lingers, the one investigators never say out loud, but always think. Did Evelyn leave on her own, or did someone make sure